Hello again, and welcome back to Lost in Translation. My name is Nico, and today we're going to take a look at the Torah portion, Mishpatim, and my top 10 points that you will miss if you are only reading the portion in English. Okay, so let's start with number one. A Hebrew slave. We have to keep in mind the context here. We just had the delivery of the Ten Commandments, and now we have a lot more laws coming to follow that up. And and essentially, the Torah is a book of laws. It can be a little confusing because the majority of the first part of the Torah is all narrative, but now from this point on, we're going to have some narrative interspersed throughout mostly um, the revelation of law. Um, so yeah, the very next law after the Ten Commandments concerns Hebrew slaves or bondsmen. And here's the thing that's interesting. Again, in Hebrew, this Eved, or sometimes or vowelized Ovid, it can mean servant, it can mean slave, it can mean bondsman. Here, we're talking about a person who serves their master for 6 years and goes free in the seventh year. So, okay, his labor is not his own during that service, but he is guaranteed his freedom. So he's not exactly a slave, right? And we'll talk about how this works. I mean, really, there are all sorts of reasons to become a slave in the or a bondsman in the old Jewish society, um, including uh, correctional for criminals. And we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Another interesting thing we see here concerning bondsmen, number two, marital obligations. Okay, right after this issue of the bondsman and the details of that situation, we see what happens if a man sells his daughter as a maidservant. Right? She's basically being given over to a marriage contract of some sort. Um, there by today's standards, there's a lot of this that seems very archaic, but by the standard of the day, the wedding contract guaranteed by Jewish law um, really protected women in a way that almost no other society um, saw to at the same time. Now, there's all sorts of reasons for why the why somebody might not want to continue with this contract. And well, okay, it says that you can't just sell this woman to another party. You have to redeem her. You have to cancel the contract, right? And also, what it says here, right here, we get a revelation of what a man owes his wife. Um, right here in number 10, if he takes another wife, right? If he takes another wife for himself, he should not diminish her sustenance, her what he owes her. He owes her clothing. The Torah is very specific here. A husband owes his wife clothing, um, food, sustenance, right? Basically, food, um, and marital relations, right? You can't ignore the new wife the relationship with the new wife. You can't ignore the relationship with the old wife for favor of a second wife. Okay, we don't have second wives, third wives, fourth wives anymore. But and again, keep this in perspective of what the economy was 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. Women didn't have a place in the economy other than being wives. So, taking another wife could even be an act of charity, depending on what's happening. Number three, murder versus manslaughter. Okay, we just had in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. Now we get a little more detail here. So here we go. If a man strikes another man and he dies, he's going to be put to death, right? But if it wasn't malicious, if it was an accident, if God brought it about into his hand, if God, this aspect of judgment, entered into the situation, Elohim, and placed it into the hand of the killer who didn't ever mean to kill, right? If it was unintentional, maybe the other person had sinned, and this was the punishment. We don't know. Maybe the killer also had sinned, and this is their punishment to be involved in this judgment. We have some sort of active judgment going on here. Well, there's a place that this person, the killer, can flee to and not be put to death. And we'll see those rules later as well. This brings us to number four, put to death. And there's all sorts of all these these prohibitions are punishable by death. Striking a father and mother, death. Kidnapping a man and selling him, death. Curses his father and mother, death. We're going to put you to death for cursing your mother and your father. Okay, so in the strict sense, yes, this is what the law requires. But in the internal sense, we should be putting to death the desires that would lead us to these actions, the willfulness, the egotism that would cause us to curse our father and our mother, to forget our gratefulness for them having brought us, helped to bring us into being, right? This is what we should be putting to death constantly and all the time. It shouldn't ever have to arrive to a human court. The court can be within us, and we can put these to death before the action ever happens, right? So there's more than just you do this and you die. There is the instruction for us to place these actions, or to put these desires to death before the action ever takes place. And you know that also brings us to the whole question of how the death penalty was administered in the Jewish court. I mean, it was very difficult for somebody to actually be executed by the Jewish court. I mean, you had to have a majority decision of the judges, and the judges were always predisposed to find a mitigating factor that would allow them as judges to escape their obligation of imposing the death penalty. You know, because they never wanted to get it wrong. You didn't want, the disposition was against punishing an innocent person. And if a guilty person left the court, and the court had fulfilled its obligation but could not find them guilty of a death penalty. If they truly were guilty, well, the Creator knew about this and He would take care of this, right? Maybe that's where the accidental manslaughter came into play again. It's it's not like what happens in many death penalty or capital punishment situations that we see in the modern world. Okay. Number five, torts. So right after all these death penalty cases, we have all these tort cases. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Latin term, a tort is damages, paying for damages. And there's a whole list of things. So if a man struck another man and he didn't die, okay, you're absolved of striking him, but you have to pay for his convalescence. you know, Very interesting here. If two men were fighting and they they collide with a pregnant woman and accidentally cause a miscarriage, well, it's not a death penalty case. It's not a murder case. The court assesses the value of the woman as a pregnant woman against her value as a non-pregnant woman, and the difference of this price is paid to the husband. Okay, by today's standards, very archaic. We're putting value on lives here, but this value is actually set forth by the Torah. Every person from different ages have a certain weight of value to them concerning their condition, and this allows for restitutions to be made um, in a monetary sense, instead of having to take care of really more blood or uh, more extreme forms of restitution or punishment. And that brings us to number six, eye for an eye. This right here is probably one of the most misunderstood, um, not one of the most, it's a very misunderstood part of the Torah. uh, People understand that if you take out somebody's eye, you have to give up an eye, or we're going to chop off your hand. No, none of that is ever happening. And the rabbinical tradition has never accepted the corporeal punishment that could be interpreted from this verse. If you understand this in the context of the discussion of torts, again, we're going back to the value of a person and the value of their organs, right? That if somebody causes these damages, they pay the restitution for the damage. So an eye, they pay for an eye. For a tooth, they pay for a tooth. A hand, they pay for a hand, right? They're not actually having to give up an eye or a hand. This old adage, if we all went by the rule of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, we'd all be blind and toothless. But that's not what's being meant here. What's being meant here is if you do damage to somebody, you pay to restore that damage, right? So, and those damages are understood through a system of valuations that the Torah gives us as well. All right, number seven, self-defense. Okay, so we've just had all these torts, and now we're going to look at some, maybe some exceptions, or right that here we see that if the thief if a thief is breaking in or tunneling in and he's discovered in this process of entering your home and the homeowner doesn't know what his intentions are, and in defense, the thief or the burglar is killed, there's no guilt for this. But if we know who the thief is and we find him on the road with our property and we kill him in the light of day, that's murder. And you can't do that, right? So, you know, again, the difference between being surprised and acting out of self-defense and and being angry that somebody stole from me and now I'm going to kill him, right? So that's delineated right here at the beginning of chapter 21. Okay. Now it continues to talk about what's to be done with this thief. He's supposed to pay back. He's supposed to pay back even more. If it's cattle, he pays 5 times. If it's a sheep from the flock, it's 4 times. If he can't pay, the court sells him into servitude, right? Remember that Hebrew bondsman? He's sold into servitude. That's what it's telling us here. Um, and he works for this person who's bought him. Usually, to buy a servant like this, you're a Torah scholar, and this person's staying in your home, and they're learning from you at the same time that they're serving you. And hopefully, after these 6 years of service, when they're let free with a generous payment, hopefully they are not only it's not just about corrections and punishment, but they're rehabilitated. They're made whole, not just you know spiritually, but also physically, financially. They're a whole person now. They can leave the household of this master and go back to a normal life without having to resort to theft or other crime. Okay, 8. False witness. Okay, so now that we're dealing with all these different types of cases and all these different crimes and punishments, when we understand that these cases are brought before a court, the way that it would work, in order to convict somebody for anything, there had to be at least 2 witnesses. And these 2 witnesses, there are a lot of requirements for them. They had to be men. They had to be Torah scholars. They had to be known as scholars, um, and so the danger is that what if these 2 people who are known as Torah scholars come together and enter into a conspiracy to get somebody convicted of a crime for whatever reason, right? Whether it's monetary gain or they're angry at this person, they want them to put to death, or they want them to get lashes, or somehow have a monetary fine. Okay, we're being told specifically this is what the false witness is, the false report is, right? uh, so if somebody comes to you and says, hey, let's do this, you're supposed to even reject the proposition to begin with, right? um, and and this also gets us to the concept of lashon hara, the evil tongue, and we shouldn't even allow somebody to speak poorly about somebody else in our presence, right? Because once we accept it, we have sinned just as much as the person who is making the bad report, right? Number 9, returning lost articles. Okay, so now we've just been told not to participate in these conspiracies to bear false witness, but we're also being told here that we're held to higher standards of honesty. It's more than just the passive, oh, I'm not going to tell a lie. It's also the active. If I see something that needs to be corrected, I'm going to go out of my way to do it. And first, uh, one of their first examples here is that if we see livestock, in this case, a donkey, a stray donkey, even if it's your enemy's bull or stray donkey, you shall surely return it. So if we're going to return the possessions of our enemies, obviously we're going to return the possessions of our friends. All right. Finally, we come to number 10. They ate and drank. Okay, so we just had this long list of rules and penalties and expectations, and now we're going back to the narrative of what's happening at Mount Sinai. And what's happening is that Hashem has told Moshe Rabbeinu to go back and bring the 70 elders and Aaron, his brother, and his two older sons, Nadab and Abihu. They're all going to go up the mountain, not completely to the top, but they're all going to ascend the mountain a bit. And this is where they all have this prophetic vision, right? That they perceived the God of Israel. Vayivu, they saw him. Well, we see him with our eyes, or Vayivu et Elei Israel be'etachat raglav k'ma'aseh levinat hasipur Em Hashemayim Latohar, right? So this pathway, or these bricks of sapphire, this, it's reminiscent of the Sepharim studied in Kabbalah, and this next part here that they uh, that they perceived and they ate and drank, right? Um, that, that in their understanding of the God of Israel, Yashar Kev, right? Gazing upon these Sepharot, this sapphire, um, and he didn't harm them, right? They weren't harmed by this situation, and את אצילי בני ישראל לא שלח ידו ויחזו את האלוהים ואוכלו וישתו. They ate and they drank. Well, what is this talking about, that they ate and they drank? Well, there are commenters who are saying that this was a sin, that they took this occasion casually, that despite this revelation, they ate and drank and had a party, and it was profaned. Others say that no, this was a great merit, that they celebrated the revelation. And it's interesting. Very soon we'll be celebrating Purim, where we have this issue of eating and drinking, and we're told that the way of the Jew is to eat more than we drink, right? And in the study of Kabbalah, we understand that 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 eating is associated with the side of mercy, and drinking is with the side of wisdom, right? That, or faith, excuse me, that eating is associated with the side of faith, and drinking with the side of wisdom. So again, in this story of Purim, that the Jew would eat more than he drinks, it means we put more faith into our practice than we require mental wisdom and knowledge, right? So here in this narrative, that the elders of the children of Israel have received a revelation, and they ate and they drank. But they had both faith and wisdom, right? If we connect the dots between these different parts of Jewish teaching, we can see that there's a deeper meaning than just they sat down and had a meal. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Um, we'll see you again next week. I hope that you enjoyed this, found it helpful, useful. Please share with me any ideas you have. Um, Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And until next time, be well.